how I gave birth, what it's like to give birth, and especially what it's like to give birth during a pandemic. A lot of sharp pain in my uterus, stomach area, and also my thighs and my back. Call the anesthesiologist, get him up here as soon as possible because I want my epidural. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and as you can tell with these bags under my eyes, I am a new mom. I currently have a 2-month-old. His name is Ezra, and I gave birth to him in October of 2020. So I thought I would sit down and do a how I gave birth, what it's like to give birth, and especially what it's like to give birth during a pandemic. Obviously right now we are in the thick of things. It's December currently. I just wanted to give you guys a rundown of what it was like to give birth my first time. I've obviously never given birth before. This is my first baby, and I know I had a lot of questions before I gave birth, and I watched a lot of these videos, so hopefully it'll be helpful for you guys if you're about to give birth or if you're just interested in what it's like to give birth. So if you're interested, then keep on watching. So first, I do want to mention that I have a birth and labor vlog. If you haven't watched it already, please click up here because that way you can kind of see what I went through in real time. I try to film as much as possible. And then this video will be a little bit more about me describing what I went through because obviously in the middle of it, I can't go through it. Also, if you hear random things in the background, it's because my husband is currently feeding Ezra, and so he might be making some noises, and I think he's crying right now, but just try to ignore all of that noise. So total my labor took about 12 hours if you count when I first got the misoprostol, which is what starts the labor process. If you're counting when my water broke, because yes, my water broke, then it was probably about 16 hours. So for a first-time mom, it actually wasn't that bad. I was expecting it to be much longer than that because I've heard a lot of horror stories, but luckily it was pretty smooth. And overall, I would say my birth and labor was a pretty smooth process. I think it was a combination of things, mainly that my baby was small. He was 5 pounds 8 ounces, and somehow I was blessed with a good birth. Not that painful of a delivery. I also got an epidural, so that's also a huge part of why it wasn't that bad. So like I said, I gave birth during the pandemic, and I just wanted to touch on a few things that were different than a normal birth. One is that when you first enter the hospital, you will be screened, asking the typical questions: have you been exposed? Have you had symptoms? Both you and your partner. And once you get there, they give you a mask to replace your current mask, even if you have a regular mask or a cloth mask, and you have to wear that at all times whenever someone is in your room. So if it's just you and your husband in your room with your baby or before delivery, you don't have to wear masks, but every time someone enters into your room, they're wearing a mask and you also have to wear a mask. So yes, that meant that I had to wear a mask during delivery. Honestly, I didn't really notice it. People would think that you're not able to breathe properly, but you're actually holding your breath when you are pushing anyway. And when I'm sleeping, I could take it off, and other instances really wasn't that bad, so I would say I didn't notice much. The other thing is that you do get tested. I was actually scheduled to be induced, so they scheduled my testing to take place a few days beforehand, but because my water broke spontaneously, I got tested once I got there, and then they got the results within, I want to say, like a few hours, and so it was pretty easy. Obviously I was negative. They actually don't test your partner, which I thought was interesting, so really they just care about the mother. During that time at my hospital, you were able to have one support person and one doula. So my husband Hui was my support person that came with me and was able to stay with me. You are able to leave to go to your car, but you're not really supposed to leave the building, and you're not really supposed to leave the premises because once you're screened, you're sort of marked as, you know, safe or screened, and so they don't want to have to do it all over again. So basically expect not to leave the hospital once you check in. So as I mentioned, my water broke, and so my story might be a little bit different than other people's. So what that means is that I was about 37 weeks, 5 days, and it was at nighttime, a random night. I got up to use the restroom, and after I was done peeing, I noticed that more liquid was coming out, but I was pretty sure I was done. And when I looked down, it was actually a clear liquid and there was no smell. And so I was pretty sure my water broke, but I wasn't positive. And so I put on a pad and I went out and I talked to my husband Hui, and I said, you know, I think my water broke, I'm not sure. And so I kind of researched online a little, and during this time, water kept gushing out from my uterus, basically. And so I remember looking up what to do if this happens. You're supposed to note the color, the smell. It was odorless, it was a clear liquid, and I already went to the bathroom, so I knew it wasn't pee. And so I called my doctor's office and I thought I would have more time, but they actually said, since your water broke, you have to go to the hospital right now. I mean, it wasn't urgent. I still took about an hour to pack all my stuff, but they basically said you shouldn't wait any longer. And so I packed all my things. I was already about maybe 75% packed, so I finished packing, got the apartment in order, and then we drove to the hospital. I was not feeling any contractions, so once I got to the hospital, then they started me on misoprostol. And this is a cervix softening drug, and so it's supposed to speed up the process since my body wasn't contracting on its own. I got this around 2 a.m. and I would say within 45 minutes, I started feeling contractions. So moving on to what contractions feel like, I feel like this is kind of the main thing that everyone's really scared about. I would say I have a low tolerance for pain, maybe medium to low. I don't have intense period cramps. I, in general, don't go through a lot of pain. My body is pretty fine. So I wasn't sure what to expect. A lot of people say it's similar to period cramps. A lot of people also say it's like you're having gas or indigestion. I would say for me, it felt a little bit more like really intense period cramps, but a little different. I would say my period cramps feel slightly different than this. For me, it was like a lot of sharp pain in my uterus, stomach area, and also my thighs and my back. So I wasn't expecting there to be pain in places other than my uterus or my stomach. Every time it came, it was like a sharp jabbing pain, and mostly I felt it in my left thigh area and hip. And they would probably last, from like 30 seconds, sometimes a minute. I can't really remember how long each time, but they vary throughout. And during this time I was supposed to be sleeping or resting, but obviously I wasn't able to do that. But there were a few coping things that helped me. I watched a few videos about birthing techniques, breathing. I would say just come up with one good breathing technique for yourself and stick to that. Breathing doesn't necessarily help that much with the pain, but it's more to help distract you from the pain. So it's something to keep you focused on while you're going through the contraction. I felt like it was a good thing to keep my mind off of the pain that my body was going through, to really focus on the breathing and getting through that contraction. The second thing that helped was counter pressure from your partner. So whenever I felt a contraction coming on, I had Hui come over and he would like push on my back. And somehow that counter pressure just also helped keep your mind off the pain and relieve a little bit of it. But of course, it's not going to get rid of the pain. For me, I also felt like moaning or verbally getting out at your pain helped some, because you're just getting out you're just voicing the pain instead of just trying to be silent, and actually vocalizing it helped a little bit. Last, I felt like holding on to something or kind of curling into like a fetal position helped me. Think about when you're in pain, what do you do to cope with the pain? Do you curl up into a ball? Do you hold on to something? Do you squeeze something? Like, I really felt like usually when I'm in pain, I curl up into a ball, I squeeze something, I like putting pressure on something, leaning against something, and so I did all of those things. I did try the birthing ball. It did not help at all. I felt like I was still in a lot of pain, and so essentially from about 2:45 or 2 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. I was having contractions regularly, and then at 9:30 I opted to get the epidural. So now to talk about the epidural part. I wanted to wait until I was about 4 to 5 centimeters before I got the epidural. It wasn't because the doctor said I had to wait. They said you could get it at any time, but I wanted to wait until my body was a little further along, because I've heard that sometimes getting an epidural could make it harder for you to dilate. So I wanted to wait until I was about 4 to 5 centimeters. Because my water broke, the nurse wasn't able to check my dilation that often, and so I had her finally check around 9 o'clock, and she was like, yeah, you're about 4 centimeters. And I was like, call the anesthesiologist, get him up here as soon as possible because I want my epidural. I was trying to hold out as long as possible. I remember Hui was like, can you just hold out until 8 a.m.? Hold out until 8:30, 9. I mean, there's no shame in getting an epidural, but of course we all have that fluffy idea that we can go through this naturally. My mom didn't have an epidural, and I thought, I'll go with the flow and see what happens. But once those contractions hit, I was like, nope, I need that epidural because I cannot survive. And you want to have enough energy to push at the end as well. So once 9:30 hit and I was 4 centimeters dilated, the anesthesiologist came and prepped me. It took probably about 30 minutes, maybe even less. It was super easy. I just sat upright in sort of like a curled position, and then he did everything to my back, put in the catheter, put in the needle. Honestly, compared to contractions, nothing else hurt. I didn't feel anything because they put some numbing cream on you. All I felt was a little bit of pressure on my back, and that was it. So it was super easy, very, like, nothing to be afraid about or concerned about. I would say if you are thinking about when to get your epidural, one thing the nurse told me that was helpful is you should get it when you can still hold still. Because obviously you have to hold still when they're putting the needle and you can't move. And if you're having a contraction and you can't even sit still, then it's gonna be hard for you to get the epidural. So I wanted to wait till I was 4 to 5 centimeters and when I could still hold still. So although the contractions were really painful, I was still able to focus and stay still for him to put in the needle. Also, once you get the epidural, you can't eat anymore, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Although, when I was having contractions, I did not have an appetite. I could not eat. If you watched my video, you saw that the breakfast was brought in, and I just couldn't. I took like one bite of my bagel, and I was like, nope, I feel way too nauseous. So you may not be able to eat anyway with the contractions, but just keep that in mind if you want to be able to eat before you get your epidural. Is that once you get your epidural, for me, I started shaking uncontrollably. I get this sometimes when I'm really nervous. I don't know if this happens to other people. I start shaking, my teeth chattering. It's like you can't stop but shake. And if you really concentrated, you could will your body to stop. But naturally, your body is just shaking so much. And of course, I was supposed to be getting rest during this time so I could reach 10 centimeters. But I couldn't sleep because I was shaking so much. I tried my best. I probably like slept on and off, but in the end, I wasn't really able to get any rest. Of course, it was way better than having contractions, but that's one thing to keep in mind is that while you're laying there, you might be shaking uncontrollably. It's totally normal. And obviously, once you get the epidural, you can't get up anymore, so you get a catheter. I had no idea, and I kind of forgot that I had to get a catheter because obviously how else are you gonna pee? I tried to research what it was like, but I couldn't find much information. Basically, they stick something up your urinary tract and it's able to draw out the pee, and it just empties into a bag. But you don't have to do anything. I wasn't sure, I was like, do I pee? But can't really feel anything down there, and so somehow the catheter knows and your body knows when to drain out the pee, so it just drains it out for you. I didn't feel anything because I had the epidural. It didn't hurt, there was no pressure or anything. It was super easy and nice. I didn't have to use the restroom or worry about using the restroom at all. And then the nurse washes your bag and replaces it when it needs to be replaced. So the catheter also was totally fine. So once I got my epidural, the next thing that happened while I was resting is that the nurse was flipping me from different sides. She had me flip on my left side, my right side. She had me sit up. She also had me use the peanut ball. And she said this was so that she can move the baby into the right position. So maybe if he's facing a certain way, if you flip one way, it moves the head to the correct position so that you can get ready for pushing. So because I got the epidural and I wasn't able to move my legs, she would just move my legs for me. And I would say that even though you can't feel your legs, you still feel them when someone's touching them. It's similar to when you get something numbed. It's not like it's completely not there anymore. You still feel pressure, or if someone's picking up something, picking up your leg, you can still feel it. So it's not like you have phantom legs or something. And it didn't feel weird at all, honestly. It kind of felt like your foot fell asleep or something, but without the tingling sensation. And so she would flip me for me and tell me when to move into different positions to get the baby in the right position. And it did work because she said at the end he was in the perfect position to start pushing. So next in this phase is the pushing phase. It took me about 4 hours to get to 10 centimeters from when I first got my epidural. So I started pushing around 1 o'clock and I pushed total for about an hour, which they say is pretty good for a first-time mom. And the time flew by so quickly, it did not feel like an hour at all. And I think it's because you're anticipating each contraction so that you can push. So when you are ready to push, they'll give you some practice pushes, and then you really only push when you feel a contraction coming. So each time you feel sort of this pressure building up down there, and then you know the contraction is coming and they have you push through it. You hold your breath for 10 seconds while you're pushing. And I know a lot of people said with an epidural you may not be able to feel how to push or what it's like to push, but I honestly felt like it was fine. If anything, you're pushing through the pressure. Because you feel pressure down there, your body and you kind of know what to do once that happens. And the nurse said it's kind of like you're trying to poop. I guess it's sort of like that, but you just push through pressure. I don't know how to explain it, but you'll know what to do. And it's not painful, it's just a lot of pressure. If you watch my video, it kind of seems like you're in pain, but really, and like, I know at some parts, my breath was like, ah, but it's because you're putting a lot of effort into pushing so that you can get your baby out. You don't want to put too much pressure so that you tear, but you obviously don't want to be there for multiple hours. And so you want to make the most out of each push. And that's why when you're holding your breath, you're also exerting a lot of energy. And sometimes it was hard to get to that 10 mark because I was just running out of energy. And so for me, it was a little disappointing sometimes because it seemed like they were getting ready. They could see the baby. It's like, oh, this will be the push. And then after you push, they're like, no, you're gonna have to wait for the next one. So it took a few tries, and I think in the end, the reason why I was so surprised is because he actually came out after I pushed. So I think the doctor said something like, oh, can you give me one more push? So I gave him a push, and then nothing happened. So I thought, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to wait for the next one. And then suddenly he was born. And I think what happened was the doctor kind of helped guide him out. He said that Ezra's head was kind of getting stuck on some membrane or something. So he did have to give me a little bit of a cut. Again, I didn't feel anything because I had the epidural, but I think that helped some to get him out. Also, because Ezra was so small, 5 pounds, 8 ounces, it was pretty easy to get him out, and I didn't feel any pain or any tearing or anything. So in the end, I got a small inner tear and then the part where the doctor had to cut the membrane, but he said it wasn't that bad at all. And I'll talk about this in my postpartum recovery video, but it was fine. The stitches were fine. I didn't feel any pain. When they stitch you up, maybe you feel a little bit of tugging, but honestly, it was totally fine. The epidural masks all pain. And like I said, compared to contractions, everything else is smooth sailing, even if there is a little bit of pain. So after Ezra was born, they placed him on my chest, and then they started cleaning him up, and you can see this in the video. And during that time, I think I birthed the placenta. I mean, obviously I did, but I didn't feel anything. They didn't ask me to push or anything. There was some membrane parts or something that were stuck in my uterus. So the doctor actually had to go in and like take stuff out. But again, I didn't feel anything. I mean, obviously I felt something going into me and like my body would move a little because he's like taking stuff out, but I didn't feel any pain or anything like that. So that is the story of how I gave birth and what it was like to actually give birth. Again, my story is pretty easy because I didn't have any complications, I didn't have any issues. So your story might be different and everyone else's birth story is different. My epidural went easily. I was able to mask a lot of the pain, and then that helped me to push and give birth. Again, my baby was small. That probably helped to make my birth a lot easier and my recovery a lot easier. But yeah, I hope this was informative for you to understand what it's like to give birth and what to expect. Again, if you haven't watched my labor and birth vlog, click up here to watch that because it'll help you to understand and see it happening as much as I could have filmed. Also, if you're giving birth during this pandemic, just know that the doctor and the nurses are all there for you. You're at least able to have a support person, hopefully, in your area. And if anything, it helps to keep less distractions and really just, you know, the main person that you want there to help you through the labor and not be completely distracted with all this advice from different people. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them below and I'll try my best to answer them. I'm obviously not a doctor and this is my first and only birth so far, but I'll try my best to give you guys some advice and answer any questions. I hope you guys have been enjoying my day in the life videos and videos about what it was like to give birth and life with my newborn Ezra. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!